Charles Schulz was more than just a cartoonist. He was a man whose joys, sorrows, and personal agonies became immortalized on paper through pen and ink, interpreted into Peanuts' own wry humor and wistfulness. 50 years straight, he penciled the strip every day, creating over 17,000 individual comics in the process. In so doing, he became the best-known cartoonist on Earth and one of its wealthiest. But in December of 1999, all that came crashing down in an instant. His family discovered him in his studio, shaking and crying, muttering that it's over. He had kept a secret for months. His hands were shaking relentlessly, his vision was blurring, and doctors had brought news that was terrible. Cancer had invaded his body, and for the first time since October 1950, Charles Schulz couldn't draw anymore. What transpired in that room brought an end to Peanuts, a strip read by hundreds of millions, and left the world believing Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and the gang would forever be around. Charles Monroe Schulz was born on November 26, 1922, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He had only one sibling, Carl and Dina Schulz's, only child. His father, a German immigrant, was a barber in a small little shop. His mother, a Norwegian immigrant, was a waitress prior to staying home as a homemaker. They never possessed much money, particularly during the Great Depression, and the hardship of seeing his parents struggle left an impression on Charles that he would forever bear. Years later, the unobtrusive anxieties of Charlie Brown and the subdued wistfulness of his supporting cast would catch up with those recollections of childhood uncertainty. From the day he was born, it seemed like Charles was meant to draw cartoons. Just 2 days old, he was nicknamed by his Uncle Forever, Sparky, named after a favorite comic strip horse named Sparkplug in Barney Google. It was a ubiquitous nickname in 1922, but no other Sparky would become synonymous with cartooning as Charles. Even his fellow artists and editors later in life called him Sparky. When the Depression struck in 1929, Charles was just 7 years old. His father's barbershop lost business, and the family had to move more than once. For a while, they moved to Needles, California, where Charles recalled the loneliness and alienation of life in a desert town. He characterized those years as weird and awful, and the fear of loss never left his mind. He subsequently offered Charlie Brown a line about fearing his family would starve if his father lost his job, an angst borrowed straight from his own childhood. His best friend when he was a boy was his dog, Spike, a black and white hunting dog with an odd personality. Spike ate nails, tacks, even razor blades, and lived. He was smart enough to ring doorbells and knew dozens of words. Sparky adored him dearly, and at 14 years old, he drew a picture of Spike and sent it to Ripley's Believe It or Not. It was published on February 22, 1937, which provided Sparky with his initial experience of fame. Unfortunately, Spike was killed when he was hit by a car when Charles was merely 10 years old. The sorrow did not end. Years afterward, Spike's memory lived on in the drawing of Snoopy, a canine much more than common. School did not go so well. Charles was shy, quiet, and bullied. Because he was intelligent, teachers accelerated him 2 grades, making him smaller and younger than the rest of his class. That feeling of never belonging stalked him. Charlie Brown's difficulties, the kid who never quite fit in, came directly from those memories. When Ripley's printed his dog drawing, peers taunted him rather than celebrating with him. Even instructors didn't care. Sparky had a harsh lesson. Success didn't imply acceptance. In high school, he flunked Latin, English, algebra, and even physics. Worse yet, each drawing he came up with to submit to the yearbook was rejected. That rejection stung so hard that decades later, at 53, he posted his old report card on the internet just to show the world he wasn't stupid like everyone thought. Home was one place where Sparky had one solid supporter, his mother. She coaxed his art even when the family couldn't even afford food, scrounging up dollars to purchase him pencils and paper. His father, Carl, considered drawing silly and wanted him to pick up a useful trade, such as barbering. This conflict at home fortified Sparky's resolve but burdened him. His mother's conviction propelled him forward, though her life was pathetically brief. In 1938, she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. During the following 5 years, Charles witnessed her suffer, making cartoons in an attempt to brighten her spirits, as morphine hardly affected her agony. She passed away on February 28, 1943, when she was just 48 years old, a few days before Charles left for the army. That sorrow became indelible. Each comic he ever created bore a piece of her. Prior to her passing, Sparky had attempted to chase his dream. He signed up at age 17 for a correspondence art course with the art instruction schools of Minneapolis. It cost $170, a staggering amount at the time, equivalent to several months of his father's salary. His parents covered it despite mounting medical expenses. Charles worked by candlelight if they couldn't afford electricity, grading papers for the same school years later to defray expenses. The sacrifices instilled in him that pursuing dreams meant perseverance. He was drafted in 1943. Schulz was a staff sergeant in the 20th Armored Division, commanding a .50 caliber machine gun squad through Europe. He arrived in France in 1945, marched into Germany, and arrived at the concentration camp at Dachau a day after liberation. The emaciated, spectral survivors passing his trucks forever haunted him. Although he was in charge of a gun squad, he afterward confessed that he didn't fire his weapon once, and hadn't even loaded it. The German soldier still surrendered. As terrible as it was, he returned with the Combat Infantryman Badge, one of his proudest achievements. But the war devastated him. He confessed later that the Army schooled him everything I know about loneliness. After the war, Schulz returned to the apartment over his father's barbershop, his life burdened by grief and trauma. He frequently considered taking his own life, but cartooning kept him alive. In 1946, he returned to art instruction schools as an artist on staff. There, among co-workers, he found inspiration for subsequent Peanuts characters. He fell deeply in love with Donna Mae Johnson, a red-haired accountant. He thought that she was the love of his life. He got engaged to her in 1950, just when Peanuts started, but she rejected him, being already engaged to another fellow. Charles was heartbroken, referring to it as the greatest loss of his life. That tragedy existed forever in the strip as the little red-haired girl, the unattainable love of Charlie Brown. Schulz's first professional strip, Lil Folks, ran in the St. Paul Pioneer Press from 1947 to 1950. He earned only $10 per cartoon. When he asked for more money and to move it to the main comics page, the editor refused. Disheartened, he quit. He submitted his work to United Feature Syndicate, which accepted, but renamed it Peanuts, a title Schulz despised. He implored them to substitute Charlie Brown, but they did not listen. He gave Peanuts the worst name possible, undignified, and resented it for his entire life. Peanuts was first published in 7 newspapers on October 2, 1950. Schulz earned $90 the first month, just enough to get by. One of his early extras was lettering tombstones to cover expenses. The first strip established the tone. Shermy and Patty gushed about good old Charlie Brown, and then said they despised him. That combination of sweetness and sadness would characterize the strip. Snoopy soon followed, appearing 2 days later. Gradually, the strip expanded. It was in 40 papers by 1952. Schulz added Linus, Lucy, Schroeder, and others. He wed Joyce Halverson in 1951 and adopted her daughter and went on to have 4 more children. Work often took second fiddle to family life. However, his perfectionism got the better of him. Peanuts reached 355 American newspapers and 40 foreign ones by 1958. Schulz's work had become a cultural phenomenon by 1965. CBS almost scrubbed A Charlie Brown Christmas when it first aired in December 1965, believing jazz music, kid actors, and Bible verses would not cut it. Half of all U.S. homes watched instead. It won an Emmy and a Peabody and set off a decades-long string of holiday specials. By the 1970s, Peanuts was featured in more than 1,000 newspapers, and Schulz was making $1 million a year from the strip alone. But fame came with lawsuits and accusations of plagiarism, which cut deep. fueling his lifetime worry. His perfectionism cost him. Schulz experienced fatigue and a handshake so bad he sometimes grasped his wrist to sketch. Nevertheless, he never accepted ghost artists or assistants. He rebuffed global studios' offers to modify characters for cultural acceptability. Preserving the integrity of Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and the Peanuts gang was more important than fortune. By the 1980s, merchandising was omnipresent: Hallmark cards, dolls, books, endorsements. Snoopy was NASA's safety mascot. Schulz was making $30 to $40 million annually. Still, though a worldwide celebrity, in interviews, he confessed that Charlie Brown was actually he, lonely, insecure, and resigned to never winning. His divorce from Joyce and subsequent marriage to Jean Clyde stabilized his life, but work always preceded. Everything fell apart in 1999. Emergency surgery uncovered widespread colon cancer that already spread. Strokes made him half-blind and too frail to draw. In December, he made the news announcement on The Today Show, crying, "I never dreamed that this was what would happen to me," he exclaimed, "taken away from me." His final strip appeared on February 13, 2000, the morning after his death at 77. In it, Snoopy composed a goodbye letter. "Dear friends, thank you." The timing was reminiscent, as if Schulz had scheduled his farewell to perfection. At the time of death, Peanuts was being published in 2,600 newspapers in 75 nations and read once a day by 355 million readers. In his will, he guaranteed no one would ever touch the strip again. Unlike other comics taken up by successors, Peanuts would cease with him. Over the years, his legacy grew murky. The 2007 biographical book, Schulz and Peanuts, portrayed him as depressive, cold, and even cheating, which provoked outrage from his children. His children maintained he was happier than the book suggested. Meanwhile, the Charles Schulz Museum was opened in 2002 and housed thousands of original strips, and it became a destination for people to revel in his art while questioning the man himself. Ultimately, Charles Schulz was neither saint nor villain. He was an introverted young boy known as Sparky who transformed a life of loss, isolation, and silent strength into a work of cultural art. He left us with Charlie Brown, Lucy, Linus, and Snoopy, characters that taught us that there is dignity in failure, there is laughter in sadness. For half a century, he worked virtually every day, building comfort and recognition for everyone who ever felt excluded. And when he passed away, it really was the end of an era.